Hey everybody, how's it going? Michael Mosley here, and today I am joined by Trevor Bogan, who is going to sit here and have a very difficult discussion with us with everything that's been going on with our industry. Mr. Trevor has experience in HR, human resources, and he is going to help us understand a little more about how these things work. Every company is different, every HR is different, so it is really nice to be able to get something directly from someone who has worked in HR, who works with people in HR with these difficult times that everybody around the industry is facing. So, Mr. Trevor, first off, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for having me. And I know this is a difficult conversation to have, but I know it's informative, and hopefully, some people get some insight and good tips and tools out of it.
Yes. And that's another thing that we're also going to be talking about how things can improve for everybody. Mr. Trevor is going to help us figure things out. If you've ever been laid off, if you've recently been laid off, hopefully some of the tips that Mr. Trevor is going to talk to us about today will help push you into a better direction. So, Mr. Trevor, first off, can you introduce yourself and let us know exactly what you do? Because I'm sure you can explain that far better than I could.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my name is Trevor Bogan. I'm Regional Director of Americas for Top Employers Institute. So I oversee the sales and operations of North America and Latin America. And Top Employers Institute, what we do as an organization is we've been in the human resource space for 33 years now. And we work with local, regional, and large global organizations and support their HR practices and initiatives. So we give each organization an HR specific survey that covers 20 HR topics because at the end of the day, Michael, as you know, in HR, they're the foundation of the house. So what they do as far as initiatives and programs that they implement for their employees drive their employees' happiness, well-being, engagement, so on and so forth. So we give them metrics and data around those HR practices, how well they do or challenges they still have, so they can benchmark themselves towards other organizations in their same industry and sector, and also create some internal alignment for themselves to really be able to strategize and really be able to implement those programs that will really help their employees for not just right now, but the future. So,
Okay. So just getting right into the nitty gritty,
mhm.
what exactly is HR? People know human resources as the people you talk to during your interview stage, who judges your resume and judge your character. But unfortunately, we also know them as the ones you speak to when you're being laid off. So, what is that in between there? What exactly is human resources?
Yeah, so human resources is really there to support the employees. So obviously there's different units of HR. So you have your comp and bend, you have your learning and development. You also have some of your internal communication, some of your marketing, talent acquisition, recruitment work in HR as well. And they're here to support the people within the organization. And so if there's programs or initiatives, maybe around well-being, maybe around leadership development, sustainability, all those kind of topics, they help the employees with those opportunities. And so their goals are to make sure that employees are consistently happy, feel good about what they're doing, create good career development for them, and also create a way for employees to have a voice within the organization as well. So, talking about things that make them happy, work environments that make them happy. I know, Michael, we have a lot of organizations telling people you need to come into the office or you're going to lose your job right now. And so, having those flex models that work for everyone, being more person centric with your employees, then to then create an environment where employees are going to have good days and bad days, but the organization is good. They're solid. They enjoy coming to work. They enjoy what they're doing each and every day. And the way the employees feel emotionally doesn't dictate whether the organization is good or not. And so HR is really the foundation of the organizations to really supply that culture for internal employees.
Okay. So here comes your first difficult question. We're going to go with who watches the Watchmen kind of thing. We know that there's two sides to a coin. HR is no different. You have your good and your bad. For some people, you do get that good HR that helps out the employees. But coming from someone who does journalism in video games, we have evidence that not all HR does this. Some of them do watch out for the company. How can employees, uh, with all the power that HR has, how can employees kind of protect themselves from the bad side of HR? Like who watches HR?
Yeah, and so that's a really critical thing for HR to understand. So it's really interesting when we look at leadership development. So leaders have to have really good communication with their employees to really understand what they look for. And so some of those skills that leadership needs to really develop themselves on is empathy training, vulnerability. They have to be able to connect with their employees so their employees feel it's psychologically safe to give information that they're going through. What ideas would impact the good of the group? Also, also starting employee resource groups with different diverse groups within your organization is critical because you want to hear what those folks have to say. But then it's not just about listening, Michael. It's really about putting action to what you're hearing. So that helps bad HR learn good things. It's those listening skills, really attuned to that, but take that listening and apply it and do something with it to help the organization. And that's when employees start to feel good about what HR is doing, no matter what. If I have a voice, they're listening, they care about me, and I'm not just a number, but what I'm saying to them, they're actually putting in actionable steps that help me and help my other colleagues. That's the best formula right there.
Okay, so for someone who's been in a company for maybe a couple of years who is still kind of scared to go to HR, uh, what would you say to them to advise them to, hey, HR is not as scary as you think. You can still go to HR and feel comfortable with any complaint or feedback that you have.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you have to be open with your communication. Now, granted, it's the way you communicate that message you have to be aware of as well. And so you can't just go in and bulldoze HR and say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I need, here's what's going on. It's all about being professional with your message, taking a step back and just getting your thoughts together of what you want to communicate, what would help them understand where you're coming from and then go and be open about those conversations. So it's like anything else, Mike, when people hold things inside, nothing gets done. And so you really just have to be confident enough to talk about those things. And this is where leadership is critical as well. So someone might not be able to go just right to HR, but they should feel comfortable when their leadership to be able to go to them and say, hey, here's how I'm feeling. Here's an idea that would help processes, or here's how we could help ourselves with a volunteerism or getting branding ourselves, anything like that. But they need to be psychologically safe to go to leadership because sometimes they don't just need to go to HR. They can go to their leader can pull HR in and have that conversation. But it's really how you deliver that message that will make a positive impact.
Okay. And for someone who wants to get into HR, what's the first step? If I wanted to be like, you know what, I do want to help people. I want to be part of the company that actually helps the employees more than employer. What steps do I have to take to become part of human resources?
Yeah, I think first steps is find a really good mentor. And so networking, especially with LinkedIn, you can always find good mentors. And so you want to look for good mentors within HR. And just, if you're local, have coffee with them or have lunch with them just to try to understand, okay, how does your job work? What are some skills I really need to do the job efficiently? How did you get into it? What do you really like about it? What challenges do you see in HR right now? And how do you move the needle with your employees internally? The more you can learn from someone who's involved in that type of position, the better off you're going to be because knowledge is power, Michael. And so the more you know, the better. So I would start looking for, a really good mentor, and then you can start looking for some skills that will really help you. And so training is at the essence right now. So you can use LinkedIn for training courses. You can find online training courses that could give you some insights within HR to try to help you learn some skills to work. Also, communication skills is huge. So you can do empathy training. There's also a lot of leadership training, even though you might not want to be in a leadership role within HR, but it's always good to have those communication skills where you can communicate with a diverse background because typically in HR, you're going to have to work with several different business units within HR. And so the more you have really good critical communication skills, the better off you'll be able to align and the more successful you'll be because you'll have a good foundation there.
Okay. What if I can't afford to go to college? I know for a lot of places, like, oh, you have to have a bachelor's in this or even a master's in this. If I can't afford to go to college, can I still get into entry level HR if I do mentoring? If I get mentored long enough, is there a way for me to kind of like squeeze into HR for corporations?
Yeah, and this is how your network is going to be really important. And you can take mentorship and you can highlight what you are learning in your mentorship on your resume. So if your mentor is really giving you some good critical insight, details on how HR functions, how it works, you can always highlight those things on your resume and utilize those. And what recruiting teams and talent acquisition teams also have to understand now is they're going to have to broaden their horizons on what they look for in a resume. And so, right now, a lot of people aren't going to college. Maybe they're getting an associate degree. Maybe they're just getting a lot of experience out there. Maybe they're taking a lot of training courses and development and leadership and learning courses to really help them be successful in roles. And so, it's really up to talent acquisition and recruiting teams to understand that candidates don't have to check every box now. You know, if they have really good soft skills, if you can see them involving themselves in the culture of the organization, look, if people are willing to learn and develop themselves, that's a strong skill as well. So, just you want to just highlight those skills, but it's up to sometimes recruiters and talent acquisition teams to look outside and look for those things to really get you a foot in the door. And the mentor can also get you a foot in the door as well. You're working with that person hand in hand. They see the activity that you're doing. And hey, if an opportunity opens, you never know where that could go as well. So,
Okay, so it sounds like while it takes a bit of work to get in there, it is feasible to do it without worrying about going to a top tier college or anything else. Okay, let's say I get in. I'm finally there. I'm HR. How stressful is the job? How mentally prepared do I have to be to do human resources?
well, I don't know. Every organization and company is different. So, I can't really speak on the stress level of the role. I do think that what HR does is very impactful to people. And when you're in HR, obviously you have to be very purposeful, and people is what you want to really focus on. And so that you can create a lot of impact when you're talking about the initiatives and programs that you want to help people with. And so maybe that's, creating a sustainability model. Maybe that's creating a great onboarding program where employees come in and have a great experience, and have a great visualization of the culture within the organization. There's so many ways that you can really help internal people, people that come into the organization, and create some good synergy there. So, I think the biggest thing with controlling the stress is just making sure that, you're open to communication, you're open to ideas, you're listening and talking to your internal people, what they like to see, how do they like to feel, what roles do they find that inspires them, what would they look at as far as a developmental plan to really move up? Is leadership where they want to go, or do they want to be deployed into a different business unit? Whatever that looks like, you want to really listen to your employees. And then what you want to do is, like I said before, you want to put action to those things and takes one step at a time. If it's just creating a group, a listening group where people can get in and talk about, how they feel about their job or where they want to go, or if it's creating a developmental model that you can pilot within the organization and you see some good improvement there, all of those things really matter.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about how people can talk to HR. We've talked about how HR can help people and even improve and how you can get into HR. So let's get down to another difficult question. Let's get right into it. There's been in the
Yeah.
tech industry, there's been so many layoffs, far too many recently. Riot Games had layoffs. Microsoft, that's the biggest one that we've had in January was the 1,900 people that were let go from their positions. There's been other companies as well that had to let go. Bungie recently did theirs. Um, from an HR perspective, from where you've been, everybody's asking the same question: What the heck is going on? Like, what's happening here? That this is becoming pretty much normal, at least to the public.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this is kind of a trend that's really not going to end anytime soon. And so, obviously, in the tech and gaming industry, one of the main causes is during the pandemic, everyone was at home, right? We couldn't really go out anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, gaming was something that was accessible to us.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that kept us busy, kept us out of watching the news of COVID and getting updates on that. It also
Yeah.
was a way to connect with your friends and family, right? I mean, if you can go on a game and you can get on a platform and virtually you can game with people across the country, you can virtually, game with your family and friends. It built some connectivity there as well. And so, even in school, I know my daughter was home, during the pandemic and getting homeschooled. So even educational systems and teachers were using gaming as just a way to kids to do their homework and get their lessons done and using gaming formats for that. So there was so much of that going on. And obviously, organizations have to be keen in on that. They have to scale up, they have to hire a lot of people to be able to support the influx of that. But now we're back to post pandemic times and where people are busy, people have other distractions, people are going all over the place now. And now we're seeing where we have a lot of people in the tech industry, and now it's time to lay off a lot of those people, unfortunately, because we just can't support the non-growth of it anymore.
Yeah, so one of the big things that everybody is doing is acquisition. And everybody knows when it comes to acquisition, there's evidently going to be layoffs. It happens every time. It's inevitable. That's one reason that a lot of people don't like these big acquisitions when Microsoft or Sony decides that, hey, we're going to acquire someone. One thing we think of, oh, cool, that means my favorite platform is going to get more support, more games. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
But of
yeah.
course, it also says in that the trade-off is also there are going to be people who lose their jobs. So how can companies? Well, no, in fact, let's go with what HR can do for people.
Mhm.
How can we ease the pain for everyone else when these acquisitions are announced? How do you prepare yourself for? I don't know if my job will be here as soon as that acquisition closes.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So one of the important things HR really needs to consider is how they communicate that message. And that is really important when you're talking about the people that work internally and externally, the viewership of the organization and the brand. And so this is something that HR really has to get their arms around. So if it's always challenging to communicate this message, but what you have to be very mindful of is giving people time to process something, right? So if you can give people enough time to say, okay, here is why we're laying you off. Here's the time frame of when we're going to lay you off, just to make sure that we're supporting you as a person to be able to find another opportunity out there, be able to kind of wrap your head and process the information. You want to give your internal employees time to do that. So if you can, it's very important for HR to give that message, the why behind it, the reasons behind it, how you can support people. Let people know, hey, it's okay. We'll do, feedback sessions or exit interview listening sessions to really understand your point of view. We really want to get an idea of how this makes you feel and what we can do to support you. And I know you can't do everything, but the message behind it needs to be we're empathetic. We understand where you're coming from. We know these are a tough time and we recognize that. We also want to hear from you as well because what HR has to understand and what organizations have to understand is your brand is very important. Your employees are your asset. They're going to go out in the market. And if you don't communicate it the right way, now you can get on social media and you can say whatever you want about that organization. You can go on Glassdoor and put a bad message around that, and you're going to go into your communities and you're really going to say that this organization was terrible. They treated you bad. You never want to work there again. And so, what HR has to understand and companies have to understand is some of that great talent you want to have come back to your organization when the dust settles. You want to have them come back if they're open to an opportunity. But if not, that's your referral system as well. Hey, I loved you guys as an organization. You were honest with me. You let me know what was going on. I know it's a tough time. Layoffs aren't easy, but I've got a couple people in my network that would be open to your opportunity. And so that's really where we come as an organization to really help organizations and companies learn how to effectively do that and get some metrics and data around how effective their internal communication is, because that is very important when you're getting to this point of where you want to lay employees off.
Okay. So, also from HR perspective, how much time does HR actually have to prepare everything to lay someone off? Is it just something that comes down from on high, or they're like, hey, in 2 weeks, you have to make this move? Because every time a CEO or a founder sends out a letter, it's always this was a difficult decision. But of course, again, we're always looking at HR because that's the face we see, the last face we see when we get laid off. How much time does HR actually have to prepare to lay one or even a group of people off?
Yeah, so it's a wide range. So sometimes people have, 3 months, some people have 2 weeks, some people have a week. It's a wide range of that. But I think what's most important is, like I said, how you communicate that message in the time that you have. And so, unfortunately, sometimes HR doesn't have a lot of time to plan it. But what they can plan is, okay, we've got a week. Here's how we're going to deliver this message so everyone can understand and learn the why behind why we're doing it. Look, it's not going to be happy anytime people get laid off. They're always going to blame someone. It's not going to be a great situation. There's nothing you can control about that. But what you can control is how that message is delivered. And if it can impact a couple of your employees or whatever that looks like, look, those are the people that are going to be going out to the market. They're going to be going into other jobs. They're going to be going into other organizations. Frankly, they're going to be going out to their communities, and the worst thing you want to do is have them slander your organization, have them talking poorly about your organization when sometimes it's not the organization's fault. It's not that the company is bad. It's just really internally how they communicate those messages.
Okay. So here's my question now. If I do go on Glassdoor and I put down, I didn't like this about the company, or this was bad, or I got fired or just let go out of nowhere, how does that affect HR? Because of course they get interviewed and stuff too by some of the higher ups. So like, okay, we give you this job, we can take it away from you. How does that affect them to when it comes down to their employment review? Like, hey, I don't think you did a good enough job letting this person go, because they instantly went to glass door and started talking about how bad the area was or how he treated them. How much of that falls back onto HR?
A lot of it, and it falls back on the organization as well. And so this is where branding is really important. And so, a lot of it falls on HR's shoulders, unfortunately. But here's what HR has to really start analyzing and doing. They really have to create some self-awareness around what they do day in and day out. And that is provided with metrics and data. And that's where Top Employers Institute can come in and do an HR survey to really see where they do things really well and things where they do really, they have some opportunities, because those are things that HR has to be aware of and really develop, because people are evolving right now. People are changing. And so what people want is different than what they wanted 20 years ago. And so you can't do the same things over and over again, because it's going to create that disconnect between what Glassdoor says, between what the organization actually is, and what HR has to combat, and so on and so forth. And so, unfortunately, it does fall a lot on HR shoulders. But what HR can do is they can create some activity around what can go better. What's the learning lesson behind it? How can we measure what we do really well in challenges and put investment into those strategies to get better? So, when we're looking at Glassdoor reviews, maybe they're not 1,000 bad reviews, but they go down to 200. We can see some tangible data that's showing us how well we're affecting our colleagues and employees, no matter if they're internal still working for us or external as well.
Okay. So I don't know how much of this HR has control over. Whenever a corporation lets somebody go, or if you're a big enough business, you say we're not just going to displace people. We're going to help them find other things. We're going to help them find other opportunities. What's the actual process behind that? Because it just sounds because from a consumer standpoint, it just sounds like PR talk. Because it doesn't affect me personally, but from the hundreds and even thousands of people who get let go, when the consumer hears the company says, "Oh man, we're gonna help them transition. We're gonna help them find new working opportunities. We have a due process." What exactly is going on behind that? I, as a consumer, have no idea what it is. What is that process?
Yeah. Well, you have to have a process. That's the first thing that you have to have. And so that's the key is this is where listening exit interviews come in. And so when you are letting go of employees, it's always good to have a good exit interview strategy where you're listening to that employee. What kind of opportunities do they like? What kind of support do they need to identify new opportunities? Is that, helping them within their own network? Is that giving them some advice and tips and tools on resume writing or, creating some sort of tool where they can create, here's some opportunities that you can look at based off your skill set? Is that training your recruiting and talent acquisition team to help people find roles, maybe help them find a recruiter that you could place them with that they could get more visibility on their resume, whatever that looks like. HR has to really strategize around that and see what is doable, right? What's realistic? Because, like you said, it can't just be PR talk, it can't just be something we're saying to people, but it has to be realistic. And that's where those listening sessions really key in because then they can get an idea what is realistic, right? So, hey, realistic for me is that maybe if you have a recruiter that recruits in the tech or gaming market, I'd love to be placed with them so they can get my resume out there. Or, hey, I'd love for you to just write me a letter of recommendation that just says, I was a really good employee, I did really well. Here's maybe where I, performed on a project, or here's where my skills really brought a lot of value to the organization. Whatever that is, but keep it realistic, keep it concise, and talk to the people to see what will make the biggest value and impact for them.
Right. So does HR actually connect like other people from HR? Because I know you always get that whole when you do your when you fill out your forms, like the last person you worked at, their phone numbers. Like, does anybody actually call those numbers? Do HR actually talk to other HRs? Like, hey, do you remember so and so? How were they?
It doesn't really get that in depth, right? It's
Okay.
not calling them and having a good conversation like, you're getting to know each other. Hey, how'd they work? Where were they work? How many kids they have? All that. It's not really that serious. All they're really calling for is to make sure, did this person work here? Did they
Okay.
work at since 2019 to 2022? Is that what they did? Okay, perfect. When you're calling more references, that's more of the recruiter talent acquisition person calling on a reference to say, okay, what were their skills look like? Kind of getting into their resume, digging into projects they worked on, so on and so forth. But HR is really there to just verify, did the person work there? Are they making things up on their resume or not? Is this realistic? And that's all they're really doing on that aspect.
Okay. Since we're talking about resumes, whatnot, let's go talk about the one thing that's gotten a lot of people really concerned about job searching.
Mhm.
Keywords and key phrases. It's become known that many companies they now use AI and computers to try to find keywords before they even send anything to HR. What in the world can we do about that? Because not everybody has like the most stellar resume. And if certain keywords are getting phased out, there's a good chance you're also phasing out good hard workers just because they didn't know certain keywords. How can employees, because we were talking about earlier about doing resumes and stuff,
Mhm.
what can I do as someone who wants to work on my resume? How can I combat that to where I can get myself in the front of the line and show that I am a good employee without knowing the magical keyword that the AI is looking for?
Yeah, and I worked in recruiting and staffing for a while in my career, and this is something that always comes up. Like, how can I use the right words to get through everything? And so what happens is a lot of the time is when you put your resume up on websites, apply for jobs directly through their portal, yes, there is some keyword searching that goes on. What I always advise to people is if you can get that recruiter's name or maybe someone in talent acquisition that works within the organization, always just send them a quick message and say, "Hey, I put my resume. Here's my name. Here's my background and experience. I'd love for you just to take a look at it because I really align with this role." So the first key is you have to make sure that you align with the skills of the opportunity. So I know when it happens when people get laid off, desperation hits, you get really panicked and worried about everything. But this is the time to just take a deep breath, recollect yourself, kind of figure out what you want to do. But when you're doing your resume, sometimes if you can afford it, have someone review it and look at it and say, okay, maybe switch this language here or use this key term here as well. I know Chat GPT, people use that just as a baseline just to try to get some language and wording that might work through a kind of AI portal or AI system as well. I know people that utilize recruiters just to say, hey, I need more visibility in my resume. I'm sick of trying to figure out, filter through chatbots, just get my resume out to the people because recruiters go directly to the hiring managers and they can just send your resume right off to the person who's hiring so that can get you more visible as well. And also, specifically with tech jobs, have a good personal brand. And this is really critical where you can maximize your visibility with your personal brand. So, highlight your skills, your achievements, projects that you worked on, samples of your work. So, anything that you can create any sort of links where people can click on, videos, anything like that. People love visualization, obviously, in tech and gaming. So if you can show people what you're doing, that can give you some visibility as well and kind of get you around some of those. I'm just going to send my resume and just click on the website and I don't know where it goes.
Okay, so it's true that searching for a job is a job within itself.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good to know that I can still use AI to combat AI. That's
It works. I mean, it's just look, AI is not going to fix everything for you. It's not a tool that you can use to say, I just want you to write up my resume and just send it off to people. You have to be able to use your human element because at the end of the day, you're going to be interviewing for the position, not Chat GPT or a robot out there. So you're going to actually be telling your story to the organization. And so you have to know your skills, your achievements. You have to be able to talk through that and effectively communicate that and storytell and give the person you're talking to, make sure they can visualize you within that role and within the organization and what you can actually bring to the table. And so you can't depend on Chat GPT to do those kind of things. And that's why it's just a way to create some sort of foundation and model just to get a baseline. But it's really up to you as a person to be able to craft that wholeheartedly so you can interview really well and get the next opportunity you're looking for.
okay. So staying on the topic of resumes and get things fixed on, you said earlier that HR and corporations have to be a lot more realistic with their hiring processes. Some of these things that you need to be aligned with for the company, as you mentioned earlier, is absolutely ridiculous. For a lot of entry level jobs, now they want, oh, you have to have like 3 to 5 years and this experience in this industry. How do I can't get into the job to get that experience. How am I supposed to actually
Mhm.
gain that to get to the entry level? It really feels like I'm being closed off because I wasn't in the industry back in 1999 or 2010 or something because I was a kid and still in school. So
Yeah.
for a lot of millennials and Gen Zers, it does feel a little hopeless because I just graduated school. I'm just now getting to the industry. I don't have that experience. So how can I gain the 3 to 5 years experience without actually ever being hired? Like, how do I get that?
Yeah, that's where, mentors come in. So if you can find a really good mentor, someone in your network to really work with to kind of help you identify what those skills are, learning and training developmental programs will really help you there. Getting some experience. So let's say you have maybe customer service experience or client service experience, or you worked for a family business. There are always skills that you can transfer to organizations and that you just have to be able to highlight. So, hey, I have great communication skills. I've worked with XYZ type of people in this business. Here's a project that I put together that really helped increase, our revenue from 2% to 105%, or whatever it is. You can really highlight those things to make it work for you. But it's also, we're in the HR space of helping HR teams to train and understand that their talent acquisition and recruiting teams have to broaden their horizon of what talent looks like, right? We can't look at candidates now that have to have a brick and mortar degree. You got to be in, this role for 10 years. Mobility now, there's so much flexibility. It's easy. I've got a laptop, a book bag. I can go anywhere, Airbnb, Verbo, wherever I want to go. I can get some experience and train there. People are job hopping a lot too because they just want to create some opportunities for themselves. And so it's really interesting for internal teams to be able to identify that. Not all the talent looks the same, and that's why they really have to talk to people. But if someone doesn't have the skills, find a mentor, the skills that you want to do, be able to highlight some of the skills that you do have that could align with the roles that you're looking for to really be able to key on those things a little bit and just build your network and build your brand and always just be talking to people. Have a good LinkedIn profile with a good professional picture, talking about some projects that you've worked on internally. Maybe you're a freelancer and you just got some experience there or a consultant somewhere and you just got some experience working at a college job or whatever it is. You just want to be able to use as much as you can and align it as much as you can. And hopefully recruiters and talent acquisition teams can start to know that not everyone has to check every box. There's a lot of good people out there, but it's up to them to really start talking through that and seeing who fits the best.
Okay. So our final question before we move on to a couple of fun questions.
Hmm.
Um, Interviews, that's another big thing for a lot of people. Congratulations, you said the magic word on your resume. You got past the filters, you got in front of somebody. Interviewing has changed so much since before COVID, when it felt like everybody was actually hiring and you had a shot during an interview. Now during the interview process, it feels like you have to say certain things to catch the ears of the person who's hiring. What can I do to make myself a little more attractive during interview processing? Because having that bubbly expression doesn't work anymore. Having that, oh, I'm a go-to attitude, I do whatever you want me to
Yep.
do, it doesn't work anymore. It's not like, yeah, but are you really? A lot of recruiters will tell you, hey, you have to be a little tough. You have to ask about the salary range. You have to ask about the turnover rate. That sounds risky for someone who's desperate to get the job. I don't want to go to,
Yeah.
I don't want to go to interview and be like, well, yeah, tell me about you. Tell me about the business. Tell me about the company, the turnover rate, and the pay range. That sounds scary to me. I'm gonna be honest. It sounds scary. I want this job. I don't want to make it sound like I'm on a power trip. I want them to like me. Interviews gotten so scary. What can I do now?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, you have to look at it. It's not a scary thing. I think the one of the key things is you have to be prepared, right? You have to practice. So practice your interviewing skills, practice with a friend, practice with a family member, whoever it is, take time to really do that step. Prepare your answers. Make sure that they're concise, they make sense, they align with the role. So make sure that the person who is interviewing you, like I said, can see you involved in this position. And that takes practice and that builds confidence. So it's not going to be scary there. When you're talking about asking about salary ranges and turnover rates and all that, you really don't have to get that critical with it, right? I think you can do your due diligence, do your research online, kind of feel out the company, kind of what they're going through. Always have that in the back of your head. I really wouldn't bring those things up in an interview. I would just ask good questions around more positive things, right? What's the learning and development process look like? How can I really get involved in certain projects and certain activities? Who would be my leader at this point? Who would I be reporting to? And tell me a little bit about them. Tell me a little bit about what they look for in a candidate to make them get excited about putting someone in this role. What does the visibility look like? What are my jobs and details and duties that I'm going to be responsible for? How am I going to be measured towards that? What kind of communication do I have within the organization? If I have a great idea, what does that look like? Tell me about the culture of the organization. And you just want to be able to see yourself fitting into the organization as well. But I would never go the negative route with anything. I go more positive because that's what interviewees want to see. The interviewers want to see that. They want to see that someone is not looking at, hey, the turnover rate's really awful. Tell me a little bit about that. No company wants to interview someone that asks about that kind of stuff. They want to ask, they want to see, okay, is this person interested? Are they curious? Are they wanting to learn? Because learning something that we can really help them with. Are they really excited about the culture? Hey, if it's volunteering, hey, I love to volunteer. How do I get that started within the organization? What's that process look like? And so you want to be able to show that you can build on things, obviously have good energy, be excited about what you're trying to do, but also paint a picture and storytell for them and ask good questions so you can paint a picture to see yourself working in that organization and the interviewer can see you being hired within that organization. And that needs to be the main focus, but practice first. Practicing is key.
Okay, so we all know you can be low energy. Will it turn off a representative? Will it turn off the interview if I'm a little too high energy? If I seem a little too into the job, or if it seems kind of fake-ish? Because like, come on, man, nobody's that excited to be an accountant. I highly doubt you're that excited about numbers. Like, is it possible that you can give up too much of energy to where you kind of freak out the interviewer?
Well, you don't have to be super extra, right, Michael? We don't want to
Right.
be too like on the next level with everything, but you do want to be positive, right? You do want to show energy because that's what people look for. That's contagious, right? I mean, when people are, I'm sure when you talk to people, hey, if people come through, they're smiling, they have good energy, that's attractive, right? You don't have to be super extra, but you want to make sure that you are bringing good people within your culture of your organization. And for you as a candidate or someone looking to be hired at an organization, you want to feel out the energy of the people interviewing you. If you're interviewing as someone who you're going to have to report to, you want to make sure that matches. If they're low energy, they're boring, they're sluggish, and you're not extra, but you like to wake up and do some things in the morning, that might not be a good balance for you. So it works both ways. You have to really monitor the energy of the person that you're going to be working with. And you want to come in with good energy no matter what. You never want to match negative energy. That's not the success that you want to have. You just want to make sure that you're confident, you have good energy, and you can show them that, there's going to be bad times. That's okay. But positivity will get people out of bad times sometimes. And that can always work. And if it doesn't want to work, that's okay too. But you don't need to work for those type of companies that don't want people to be happy and smiling and good energy as well. You never want to work there. And accountants are very head down anyway, Michael, right? They're not in the game to be talking. They're here to crunch numbers and make sure, the companies are profitable. So sometimes those people, might have good energy, might not, but that's okay. But in the roles that you want to align for, you got to have good energy because you got to, first impressions are huge. And if you make that first impression where they're like, this person really seems sluggish. They seem like they just woke up from a nap. That's never good. That's not going to get you roles anytime soon.
Okay. All right. So I did the interview process. I'm now in the door. Now I have to make sure HR knows that I still exist and that I'm still a happy little camper. There's always peer reviews and the like. But it's hard to keep up
Mhm,
that same energy all the time.
mhm.
Uh, so when I do get comfortable with the job, and of course the bright-eyed bushy tail goes away, how much does HR look at that like that person right there may not get as far, or they're gonna be like, "Oh, finally, you're the way I'm pretty sure you're gonna be every day." Do they judge you based off of that?
Well, you have to be very, in HR, you have to be very person centric. Look, we're people at the end of the day. We have lives. So we,
Right? Yeah.
have dogs, we have kids, we have maybe another job, we have side hustles, we have family, we have maybe an elderly person we have to take care of. Maybe, our finances are a little tight. There's stresses, there's concerns. Look, we're people, right? At the end of the day. And so I think when you're in these roles where you have to understand people, you have to be empathetic and vulnerable around these things. I'm vulnerable with my team. There's team days that, hey, you know what? I'm not excited every day. That's human nature. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for people, and I want to make sure people understand that yeah, you don't have to be 100% all the time. I'm here for you. Talk to me a little bit about it. What's going on? What concerns do you have? Because at the end of the day, you know it's just creating that environment where if you are down, that's okay too. That's fair enough. I know my leader's the same way. He or she's open about it, and I can feel the same way. I know I don't have to be on all the time, but at least they ask me. At least they talk to me a little bit about it. You don't have to share everything, but I just, hey, if you can give me some perspective of what's getting you down right now, just want to know, just in general, so that way I can work with you more efficiently. That's okay too. So I think people understand that. But I do think there is those organizations or companies where they're just like, why are you down? What do you need to do? Pick yourself back up. Come back at it. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And that formula doesn't work anymore. And that's where leaders come in, leadership development to really talk about, have those skills to coach people like that, talk through those kind of things. Maybe include wellness in your performance reviews. We see organizations that do that all the time. They just ask questions, how you feeling? What can we do to make you feel better? We know you're not going to be excited every single day, but what can we do to get you excited 98% of the time, instead of
Right.
50% of the time? And that's what's key. And that's, I think if you have to come in with that holistic human, you know, upfront value to people, and that's what resonates well. Look, I'm not here to talk to people like I'm a robot. I'm a person. So I can talk to my team and my internal colleagues like a person. I understand what they're going through, and I know that there's going to be ups and downs, and that's okay too. But how can I help you? And how can we make you feel better, more percentage of the time than not?
Okay. Okay. So we're getting close to ending our interview. So here's a little something for the workers, for the employees.
Yeah.
One of the big things for the past couple of years, quiet quitting, people who just do enough to skirt by. Uh, does that make HR nervous? Does that scare HR? Because when you start to notice, like, oh no, we've seen we when it comes to business blogs and whatnot, you can't really trust everything that they say. They're like, oh, HR is so concerned about it. Just how concerned is HR when they realize that somebody is doing the quiet quitting?
Well, as a topic of concern, right? I think when you see this, and this is all around how the media displays a lot of things, when you see those things of large numbers of quiet quitting, people leaving organizations, people just doing enough to get by, and then they have one foot out the door and they're leaving, those are all things that HR has to really realize. Again, it goes back to how HR measures what they do that affects their employees. And so we've done a lot of data and analytics with large organizations where they do a mirroring technique. And so one of our top employers did a mirroring technique between what they do in their HR practices, the initiatives, the programs they put in. They did an employee survey as well to see what they do in HR dictates how their employees feel. And when you do those exercises, then you can kind of see and gauge some of those aspects where quiet quitting doesn't come into play because what you're providing, quiet quitting doesn't exist because if you're doing the right things on the HR end, your employees aren't worried about looking at other jobs. They're not looking at, just getting by to leave your organization. Quiet quitting typically happens, and I'm not here to say organizations do things right or wrong. There's no perfect company out there. But what happens is those organizations that aren't forward thinking, those organizations that aren't aware of what they do, that don't understand the data and metrics and the effects of what they do, how that affects their people, that's where you're going to see a lot of internal people leave. Networks are vast now, Michael, as you know, social media, LinkedIn. People have networks out here now. It's not 20 years ago where we didn't have any YouTube, Google, all these networks where we couldn't go and find another job. There's networks out there that are vast. People have followers. So they can just go and say, hey, if this organization isn't listening to me, they don't want to do anything for me. Well, look, I'll reach out to XYZ person. I'll have 5 opportunities laying around for me that I can get into that work for a company that really cares, that listens, that does things around what they're going to say. And so HR has to be keen to that because there can be scares. There can be some fear around quiet quitting, but if you do the right things and you continue to evolve and learn and develop and grow, then you can kind of see those topics of quiet quitting or those actions of quiet quitting happening, and you can do something about it before it gets really, really bad.
And let's go with the outset for our last question of this interview. Quiet firing. It seems like corporations have decided, okay, we're going to quiet quit. We could also play that same game. And now there's quiet firing to where I don't know how much HR has to play in this role, to where the company purposely makes things a little untangible for the employee to the point to where they do want to leave on their own virtue rather than them getting fired and laid off. Because I guess it makes the company look a little better. I'm not really sure, 100% sure how that works. You think either one would just look bad, but I guess one is
Yeah.
worse than the other. I, as an employee, when I realize or when I at least suspect that the company I'm working for is trying to do that to me, to where they're putting too much on me, to where I am getting burned out, and to where I might want to leave, how do I protect myself from that? How do I combat the theoretical quiet firing?
Yeah, I think the key is you have to ask yourself, how can I be an asset and not a liability to my organization? And so, what you really have to do is focus on, okay, what kind of skills can I develop? How can I learn some new systems, take on more projects, raise my hand and get involved in certain aspects of the business to really help show the organization and myself that I'm an asset and not a liability. So that's the first thing that's really critical as an employee who is just trying to make sure that they can hang on to their job. And so developmental and learning practices will always really help with that. Taking on different initiatives that might help as well. Hey, I want to start this process because what I've seen is this really slows down our workload. So let me implement this. Let's pilot it, let's test it. I've talked to the team and group about it. They're all in. And let's see what we can do because I really want to change things. I really want to change proficiency within the team because I know that's less stress for us, better work. We can produce things at a faster clip, whatever that looks like. On an HR perspective, this is where HR really has to make sure that their leaders are checking in with their employees as well. And so, what happens sometimes is leaders don't talk to their employees a lot to really get interested in what works for them. So sometimes not every employee wants to be a manager. Not every employee wants to be a leader. Not every employee wants to stay in a sales role for the next 5, 10 years, leaders have to get really good at analyzing where their internal colleagues' skills match. And maybe that can be a, hey, I know you don't want to be a leader within the organization, but Michael, look, your skills can really work in operations. I'm seeing you put some tasks together. I'm seeing you implement some proficiencies that could really work well in this department over here. I think you would be a great fit. And what that's going to do is one, that's going to make the leader look really great because they're able to identify skills that can work with a different business unit, work really well. And that's going to give the employee some confidence to say, hey, man, you know what? I don't want to be a leader. I'm glad that they identified that, and I can move into something where I'll be more successful, more fulfilled, more productive in that type of role. And so I never, the quiet firing is never a good idea. It can happen sometimes, but there's always ways to take action to avoid those kind of scenarios.
Okay. All right, Mr. Trevor, this has been very enlightening. I think this is the first time I've ever talked to somebody within like the business beyond just voice acting or
Yeah.
something. This is the first time I got to talk to somebody who does HR and accounting and CEO and CFO and all that. So this is actually very informative. This is really great. Thank
Yeah,
you,
no,
Mr. Trevor, for taking the time to help us learn a little more about what HR does and how it affects employees and employers, and to give us a little more info on the new age of hiring. I don't like it. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like this new age of hiring. I really don't. uh, but
it's okay.
but it is nice to hear firsthand that the whole AI filter is a real thing. I'm not being crazy, and it is good to know there is a way to combat that. So, Mr. Trevor, thank you so much for speaking with us and letting us know firsthand about HR's experience. Is there anything that you would like to plug in or talk about before we sign off? Anything of your socials? Any way people can contact you if they want more help with their resumes or even making connections?
Yeah, so definitely find me on LinkedIn. Just type in Trevor, Trevor, Bogan, Bogan. I'm all over LinkedIn giving tips and tools and helping people. Also go to our website. So www.top employers.com, and you really can get some good information on what we do as an organization to provide HR teams support with data, analytics, metrics, real tangible information to help you analyze your effectiveness of your HR topics to really help shape your world of work, your organization, your employees. Michael, don't be so scared of hiring right now. It's okay, man. It's going to get better out there. There's ebbs and flows with everything. If you're on the market looking for a job, stay positive. That's the biggest thing. Things always turn around, but create a good resume, create a good LinkedIn profile, create a good network, and find a mentor out there that can really help you get your foot in the door at opportunities. So thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I really appreciate the conversation, and I'm glad to be able to provide insight and support.